change the world. On we go.
Hey friends, welcome back to Coffee Over Apples. My name is Steph. It is officially Hispanic / Latine Heritage Month, and I'm here for you with some nonfiction recs by Latine authors that I highly recommend you read to learn more about Latinidad and the Latine experience. Before I begin, if you'd like to support my channel in any way, consider becoming a channel member at any level to get access to all of my book clubs. The money goes basically towards purchasing books by diverse authors, my mental health journey, supporting my cats, all the above, or just consider subscribing and liking this video. I've got 5 recs for you here today. The next book that I'm going to highly recommend you pick up is Defectors by Paola Ramos. The subtext is the rise of the Latino far right and what it means for America. This is so relevant to what we're seeing right now in the United States as far as unpacking why BIPOC individuals would vote and support people whose rhetoric goes against their livelihood. I cannot encourage you enough to read this book. Now, personally, I think there are ways this book could have gone deeper, but if you haven't taken the time to really think about why Latines vote right-wing or can be extremist right-wing in themselves, this unpacks a lot of things. It's broken up into different sections where it talks about nationalism. Something that I think should be pointed out is that it dives into ways in which you can be part of the minority, but also just be so deep in the Kool-Aid from the demographic that you want to be a part of. Cough, cough, white. It's easier for the individuals examined in here to blame their own community for not rising up to the level of exceptionalism that white supremacy has placed upon them, rather than blaming white supremacy themselves because they see whiteness and white supremacy as the only way to success. I'm going to put air quotes for that, especially because the point that's brought up in here is that a lot of Latina countries have some sort of history with dictatorship and with extreme forms of communism. And so when these people come to America, what they're aware of and have lived under is communist as vis-a-vis dictatorship. And so when they see socialism here in the United States, or they see anything that the left stands for, it's automatically associated with communism. Therefore, they fall into this strong man, strong arm rhetoric of the only way to battle communism is with what they don't seem to see, which is authoritarianism and fascism, which is also not the answer. There's different interviews done in here from different members of Latina community across the United States, interviewing people as to why they are against immigration when they themselves are immigrants, interviewing people who are part of movements like Moms for Liberty, who are immigrants against telling the stories of other immigrants, or people in the queer community being against trans individuals who are also part of the queer community. So it's just all of these kinds of cognitive dissonances that are explored in this book, which I think is really important. It talks about the way that news carries into Latina countries from the United States because of the monopoly that certain organizations have on news outlets. And so there is this really big issue with propaganda and the way that Latinos get information about politics in the States before they even get here. And the author also is a news reporter for MSNBC. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of MSNBC, but I am a fan of Paola Ramos. So I would actually highly recommend that you listen to the things that they have to say. If you don't want to read this, go check out their Instagram. They're talking about the news all the time from a Latina perspective. One that I don't physically have, but I absolutely loved, and will go feral with a reread. I sobbed my eyes out at the end of this book. Okay, I sobbed. In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This is a queer story. This is such a unique nonfiction because it is a memoir, and it does include research from the author in regards to queer domestic abuse. Trigger warning for descriptions of that. It's told in these vignettes of memory that kind of crisscross time during these years that the author was in a lesbian relationship with an ex-partner. They kind of talk a little bit about their family dynamic and how they feel that they were emotionally primed to be in an abusive relationship, and the ways in which they became a victim of this, why it took them so long to recognize that they needed to get out of this situation as a queer, curvy, lesbian Latina. It's explained the way that their ex-partner manipulated them, and I don't think that we have enough stories about queer relationships, period, to be able to illustrate that things like domestic violence are not just the product of men, because women can also be culpable of committing domestic violence or any violence. Those same bodies, queer bodies, anybody can also be a victim of domestic violence. And so these kinds of situations within queer relationships are not explored as much, or these cases are not usually taken seriously in court as illustrated in the book, because it's usually considered that domestic violence is something that is usually only committed by men. And so when lesbians and other queer people try to bring these cases to court that their significant other was mistreating them, their pleas are not taken seriously. And we see that throughout the different cases that Carmen Machado gives us. They don't just talk about their relationship, because in their relationship they didn't necessarily go to court for it. We see the author kind of reckon with their family, who is more conservative Latine, with whether their qualms should be taken seriously. So I actually do highly recommend the audiobook for this, but just pick it up either way. This one is something that I actually read for grad school a while ago, and it's called Latinx art. The reason that I'm recommending this is because art is a product of culture, and art is always political, just like how books are always political. What I enjoyed about this was that the author spent a lot of time talking about Afro-Latine artwork and the way that Afro-Latinas are suppressed in the art market, because the art market is very much controlled by white bodies. And so there's this kind of thing that's been happening in the past 10 years in the art world where Black artists are starting to get the space to be able to exhibit their work for their own people, and they don't necessarily need to cater to the white gaze or allow the white gaze into the space at all. But that also comes with a couple hurdles that are happening, such as how do the institutions protect these artists from these spaces and protect them from white individuals who feel that they deserve access to art spaces because they don't necessarily understand the connection to art and culture. So they spent some time examining different galleries across the United States over like the past, I think, like 10 years. And even though this was written, I want to say this was written in like 2017, 2018. So I think they started doing their examinations in like 2007 or 2008, something like that. But about how Afro-Latinas are completely underrepresented, because a lot of the Latina representation that is brought forward in art institutions like museums, and what I can even say in like colleges and acceptances, because I am also a part of that group of like, hey, I can recognize that a reason that I have been accepted to many things is because I am a white Latina, I am white passing Latina, and so therefore I am the quote unquote safe choice, which is like really messed up. But that a lot of places are fearful of including Afro-Latinas into the conversation because it's going to be this intersectional place between the Black and Hispanic lens. Places who do not have the capacity or the people in place who have the knowledge to be able to steer these conversations in a safe and constructive way have been actively avoiding representing Black voices, and that is a huge problem within the Latina community. Like there's a lot of colorism within the Latina community, point blank period, and so this explores the art side of that. So I would definitely 10 out of 10 recommend this if you're interested in understanding like the current art market. Next, I have Our Migrant Souls, A Meditation on Race and the Meanings and Myths of Latino by Hector Tobar. I annotated the heck out of this book. I found it extremely interesting because what Hector does is he's a professor, I think at UCLA, and they start off by talking about conversations that they had with their students as far as like reckoning with being American and being Latina, coming from being an immigrant or being the first generation child of immigrants and like losing one's identity within Latinidad because of the assimilation to American culture. So trying to maintain those roots, but existing in the space where they have to assimilate in order to be part of like the success that their parents expect of them, but wanting to reconnect to their roots back home. So the author actually goes across the country to different states where they have different like major populations of Hispanic communities, such as Dominican communities, Mexican communities, Puerto Rican communities. I think there's a Cuban is examined here as well, if I'm not mistaken. And they're basically talking to the community, and he's asking people like, why do you vote left? Why do you vote right? How do you reconcile that with your own identity and what you think you're going to do for other families who are coming through the path that you came through? It's very interesting because it's kind of exploring the map throughout the greater United States of how Latinos vote in different sections of the country and what rationales they have for those things. Where it goes into the myths and meanings of Latino is because each person kind of redefines what Latinidad means to them based on what they think is better for the country. In some cases, Latinidad has like a positive connotation, and in other times it's kind of seen as synonymous with immigrant, which for them is also synonymous for illegal because they're so wrapped up into this extremist right-wing rhetoric. Anyway, I highly recommend. They have another book, very well written. And then my last recommendation is going to be So Many Stars: An Oral History of Trans, Non-Binary, Genderqueer, and Two-Spirit People of Color by Caro de Robertis. Like the amount of trans voices that are in here are beautiful. The amount of diverse voices that are in here are beautiful. It talks a lot about mental health in queer communities, finding your spaces, finding your found family. So if you're someone who needs positive stories of queer, trans, two-spirit people, genderqueer, non-binary experiences, I highly recommend picking this up because this is like there's a lot of hope core in here, and that's actually a really beautiful thing because I don't think we have enough of that. Now, that doesn't mean that it doesn't touch on some really dark things. It talks about immigrant Hispanics, queers who were victims of cartel violence in their countries and things that they had to do by hiding who they are as an individual in order to make it across the border or to come here via different legal avenues. But that doesn't mean that when they got here that they were necessarily accepted. So I think those are really important stories that we have to hear. It doesn't just talk about Latinos, it talks about people from many different countries, many different cultures, but the author being Latina and having these conversations that they translated with Hispanic members of the queer community are very important to hear. So the audiobook is also narrated by the author, and I will say that this book is not in the author's words. This is actually like a collection of interviews. Don't go into this nonfiction thinking that you're going to get a ton of research from academic sources. This is very much like firsthand experiences from 20 different individuals from all of these different intersections of life. I hope that you've considered picking up any of these because I really can't recommend them enough. And if you'd like to talk to me about them or you have any questions about them, drop those thoughts into the comments because I cannot talk about any of these enough. I hope you like this video. I post videos whenever I feel like it. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Mr. Wonka worked the